tomorrow night on the West Coast against the Seattle Mariners. 10:10 start time for the 2024 Boston Red Sox. And, of course, the team coming off back-to-back last-place finishes, 78-win seasons. I think this town could use a full Roche moment out of you. But what are your realistic expectations for the season?
Realistically, it's going to be hard, Joe. I think we've all watched how the offseason has unfolded. I think there's concern pretty much everywhere when it comes to this Red Sox team, starting with the manager and his, declaring at the beginning of spring training that he doesn't want to talk contract and he's under contract for this year. And that's it. And now it's up to Craig Breslow. And so far, nothing has been announced for a contract extension for Alex. So, he's under the microscope for this 1 year. And then he has to decide whether or not he wants to stay here, whether or not he likes the plan of what unfolds, and whether or not Craig Breslow likes him. He likes Craig Breslow. So there's lots of concerns starting at the top when it comes to things. But, I think for this purpose, right, with 162 to go, you just kind of hope that everything goes right for this team early. They get on a roll, add to it, and get going. That's pretty much all you can say right now if you're a Red Sox fan, right?
Yeah, and we'll hit on all the different aspects of this team, but I think where fans are most concerned is that starting rotation, right? And the guys that were out there in free agency and the guys that they didn't get. As we're recording this right now, Jordan Montgomery, still a free agent, even though he was training here in this area. But the big offseason news for the Red Sox on that starting pitching side, that they did lock up Brayan Bello. 6 years, $55 million extension. There's also a team option for after those 6 years for that next season. What are your thoughts about him being the ace of this rotation now? And not to mention, he's the youngest opening day starter for the Red Sox since Aaron Seeley in 1995. Only 24 years old and coming off a solid season.
Yeah, I think, he's got the potential to be really good. We've seen that. We've seen the stretches from him over the last couple of years, so we know that he can do it. But the question mark obviously is, why put so much pressure on him right now out of the chute? Yes, it's an honor to start opening day and what have you, but again, I go back to this offseason. You had an opportunity to bring in a Jordan Montgomery, a Blake Snell, what have you, to go along with Lucas Giolito and Brayan Bello and on and on and on down the line. And the rotation would be so much better right now if you had a top of the rotation guy. And if, Giolito, you didn't expect him not to be healthy, but, Bello, you'd like in that third spot, right? And then that kind of works everything backwards. And for me, I've been a big proponent of, if you find guys that are key to a bullpen, keep them there. I don't care if they want to be a starter. And, I may be proven wrong with Whitlock and Houck, but I like those two guys in the bullpen. I thought it was successful when Corey used them. And I think that's, for me, would have backed everything up. So to me, that was the biggest problem that they had all offseason long, was not getting that top of the rotation guy to go along with everyone else that they had.
Yeah, and I think we all have high expectations for Brayan Bello too, but he's far from a finished product. And we saw it at the end of last year where his numbers started to tail off. I think the big thing for him this year, he's got to learn how to get left-handed hitters out, because they hit over 300 against him, high slugging percentage, solid on-base percentage. And as the season progressed, you started to see him wear down, and his ERA ended up being over 4 at the end of the season. I couldn't agree with you more about the rotation, though. And I look at the rotation, the 5 guys that they have. So after Brayan Bello, Nick Pivetta, followed by Cutter Crawford, then you have Garrett Whitlock, Tanner Houck. If you just bumped the rotation 2 spots down, right? So you had Bello be your 3 starter, then you had Pivetta be your 4, and Cutter Crawford your 5. You might be having a rotation that has championship expectations. But as you mentioned, they don't make those moves. And now they're relying upon Garrett Whitlock and Tanner Houck to be those starting pitchers again. They've looked good in spring training, and especially Garrett Whitlock against Texas most recently. But you're asking a lot of these guys and expecting them to be thrusted into roles that they've been given the opportunity to thrive in, and they haven't done that quite yet.
Yeah, and again, if you have a veteran experienced guy, now Giolito was part of that plan, so I'm fine with that. But even if you bumped, you had to bump Bello up to the 2nd spot, and you put a Jordan Montgomery, like we said, or Blake Snell, someone in that, guy that will take the ball every 5th day and relish it. Instead, you have Bello, who's a kid, who's still trying to learn his path. And I'd also like to get some veteran starters in here to teach him that path, to get him on the way where others have taught players from the past, hey, this is how we do it. John Lester was big on that. Josh Beckett, bringing in guys like that to lead the young guys. And he's by himself right now on an island trying to be the ace of this rotation. And you also need 6, 7, 8 starters over the course of a year. And one other quirk about this rotation, and I'll give you a little optimism here, is the last team that started 5 right-handers. Two things. For each of the first 5 games was the 2007 Red Sox. And then the last time they had 161 starts out of right-handers in 2004. So there's no lefty in that Red Sox starting rotation. You take that maybe as a good omen, because maybe miracles will happen here and they'll go back to 2004 and be successful.
Yeah, we can only hope. And we think of Pivetta too, right? A guy that at the beginning of last year looked like he was done. And as the season progressed, he developed a sweeper. He calls it, Dan, the whirly bird, which is one of my favorite type of pitch names I've ever heard. That really changed things for him. He became a really good pitcher from May 28th to the end of the season. 3.05 ERA, struck out a ton of batters too. At about 12 and a half strikeouts per 9 innings. So I think he could be a guy that this season, now that he's developed this full repertoire, could be really successful and could be a top of the rotation guy.
But he looks a lot better as a 4 guy. You know what I mean? As a number 4 guy in your rotation. And then Cutter Crawford, okay, so if he can be our 5th starter, you can manipulate, and he's going to get better from last year, you think. And then you're in much better shape. But again, in the AL East and all these teams that they're playing, it's going to be tough on this pitching staff.
Yeah, and we'll see how successful this new pitching program is under Craig Breslow too, right? They hire a new guy at the top. Heimblum's not here anymore. Pitching was sort of a deficiency under him or in his tenure with the Red Sox. Craig Breslow did great work with the Cubs. Andrew Bailey, their new pitching coach, awesome stuff with the Giants. Turned a lot of careers around. So they're going to have their work cut out for them, but we'll see what they can do with the rest of this rotation. But speaking of question marks, I feel more confident about this guy than I think the rest of Red Sox Nation does. But I understand the concerns because we haven't seen a ton of him these last 2 years. That's Trevor Story. He's healthy. He's looking great in spring training. Of course, going to be the starting shortstop. He had a home run against the Texas Rangers on his son's birthday, a 2-run shot on his son's 2nd birthday. What are your expectations for Trevor Story this year? And do you think this year is the first year in which he actually lives up to the contract?
Yeah, because, he was kind of thrown into that spot. He almost considered him damaged goods when he got here, right? Because everybody knew about his arm, and it wasn't, it was a concern, and the Red Sox tried to say, okay, it'll be fine. And as it turns out, it wasn't. So now he's coming off the Tommy John, and then his bat really struggled. And it's a mental battle too, physically, mentally, to come back from something like that, his arm issue. So now I think he's slotted in as the everyday shortstop. He doesn't have to worry about playing second base. And it looks like he's comfortable. He's ready to go. Coming out of spring training, he had a great spring. So I think that's one of the optimistic things that you look at with this Red Sox lineup, to give him a bat to go with Devers. And you hope that Casas can come up as well. So you kind of look in that middle of that lineup, it's not bad. They're going to score some runs, Joe. I think their offense is going to be pretty good. And Trevor Story is expected to be a huge part of that, and he stabilizes the defense. We saw them go through so many shortstops last year. Alex Cora was begging to sign a major league shortstop, didn't get one. But I think having Story in that lineup every single day, shortstop and his bat, will be a huge boost for this Red Sox everyday lineup.
Yeah, it was amazing how much he changed things defensively for them last year. They actually had like a plus outs above average in September with him at shortstop, but the overall numbers we know were atrocious for this team a season ago. So we'll see what it's like for him out there at shortstop. Hopefully healthy for the entire season. They get a good year out of him because he missed 187 games over his first 2 seasons. So that 6-year, $140 million contract that he signed right toward the end of spring training in 2022. It's one that so far the return on investment hasn't been great, but there's still, of course, time for that. And we remember what player he was in Colorado with the Rockies. This was a guy from 2018 to 2021 with the Rockies. His prime years, tied for 12th in Major League Baseball in home runs, 20th in wins above replacement. He was one of the best players in baseball, top 20 player in baseball. And they need him if they're going to have any type of successful season, I think.
Yeah, and to go with Devers, because you don't want to have Devers walk every time he comes up to the plate. So I think it's a big factor too. Make sure you got plenty around him, and you need Casas to step up too. And if you can throw him in the left-right combo too, gives Cora a balanced lineup as well.
You brought up the offense in general, Dan. I'll throw one at you here. Do you think the offense is currently constructed could be a top 10 offense in Major League Baseball in terms of runs scored, on base, slugging. Home runs last year, they weren't near that category. But what do you think of the offense coming into the season, and can they be a top third type of offense in Major League Baseball?
Well, I think, a lot of it depends on what they get out of certain positions. You know what I mean? What they get out of the center field position. Say Don Rafaela be ready to go on the major league levels. He looks good at times this spring. He's had a really good spring, basically earned the job. But then you worry about, they start pitching him differently when the season starts after they adjust to him. Can he be a key part of that? And then, what do you get out of your outfield? That's kind of another big key. But again, the middle of the lineup should produce. The guys that you mentioned, you look at that infield, it's going to be one of their strengths. Second base is a worry because of Vaughn Grissom. You hope he comes back and starts playing soon. But having Costas Devers as well as Story is a big part to start. And then you kind of go from there. And Tyler O'Neill should be a boost with a right-handed bat. He's a power hitting type of guy. So they should score runs, Joe. I don't know if they'll be a top 10, but I think they have a chance to be a top 10, top 15 type of offense if everything goes right.
Two big bats missing from last year's team that are not on this year's team. Justin Turner, who was one of the more clutch players I've ever seen wear a Red Sox uniform. Not quite David Ortiz level, but had a lot of big hits last year. And Adam Duvall as well. But you have Tristan Casas now, second full season. And the second half of last year, this guy just turned into a monster. I mean, one of the best hitters in baseball, seventh in OPS in this sport from the post All-Star break, or right after the All-Star break, until he ended up finishing his season in the middle of September. Now you get him for a full season, a lot of contract extension talks as well. Hopefully they can get him locked up for a long-term deal. And then you have Rafi Devers too, Dan, as a guy now second year as the anchor, right? Last year, you could tell in the beginning it was a little bit of an adjustment for him to be that guy with no Xander Bogaerts, and of course the exodus of talent on the offensive side over the last couple of years. Now you got him a little bit more comfortable with who he is. We've heard him speak up in spring training about what this Red Sox team needs. He seems to be more comfortable as the leader of this Red Sox team, and hopefully that translates to a career year.
Yeah, and again, spring training is all about the what ifs, right? And if this can happen, if that can happen, there's a lot of good things that can happen with that lineup. And Casas could be that everyday type of player. It could emerge as an all-star type of player, the way that he adjusted once he went through his, early season troubles. But then there's the flip side of that too. You got to worry about, okay, it's year 1, year 2, year 3. Things are going to happen along the way. Slumps are going to happen. How does he come through that? How does the offense come through that? Those kind of things that you worry about. But at the same time, guys have a chance. Again, that's probably your strength right now, is a chance to do some damage with the bat. And you hope that Casas is that guy, the mature enough guy that emerges as a leader, emerges as an everyday player, and is a big help to this Red Sox offense right in the middle. Because you need, face it, you need, with what they have, the lack of depth, you need superstars out of this lineup. And he hopefully could be one of those type of guys.
Let's switch gears to defense now. And I apologize to Red Sox fans for having to read through the stats from last year. It might hurt your stomach a little bit, but I just want to paint the whole picture of just how tough it was to watch this team defensively last year. So they're the second most errors in Major League Baseball a season ago, second most throwing errors in Major League Baseball, third worst fielding percentage, and then last in outs above average. They're at minus 50, Dan. The next worst team was the Reds at minus 37. What do you think we can expect from this team defensively? We talked about Story being back. They got Tyler O'Neill, who's a Gold Glove outfielder. It could be a different look. I'm just not sure how much, but what do you think?
I think you should be a talk show caller with that first part of what you went on to say on and about how bad the Red Sox were. Second of all, yes, they should be much better defensively because of Trevor Story up the middle. That's a big start of it. You think about how do you build a team, right, Joe? Fundamentally, in baseball, the way to go is up the middle, right? So the strength, you look at Connor Wong, he looks like he's developing as a defensive catcher and continues to be, throw out runners. He's got a lot of those qualities. And then you go up to Story in the middle. It's got to be better than it was last year with so many injuries at shortstop and really guys that shouldn't have been there, shouldn't have even been playing perhaps on the major league level. And then again, that key spot's going to be second base. And Manuel Valdez is, he's a huge question mark defensively, so you hope to get Grissom back, and then it's okay. And then Rafaela is another question mark up the middle, so you hope, we've seen what he can do with the glove, and maybe he emerges as a second baseman as the season goes on. But if you start and go up the middle like that, I think you're in pretty good shape. Tyler O'Neill can be a good outfielder. We've seen him. He's won a Gold Glove, I believe, right? So He's the kind of guy that could be a staple out there. And Abreu, well, you're Abreu. We haven't really talked much about him. He can go get it, so he'll be fine. So I think, yes, Casas looks like he's learning to pick and do a lot of things as a first baseman. Devers is Devers. I think you need Cora to get on him daily to become the guy that he needs to be defensively. So a lot of positive signs when it comes to much, much better defense for this Red Sox team this year.
All right, and then finally, Dan, in terms of overall team aspect of the game, let's hit on the bullpen for a moment. Two guys at the back end were awesome last year, Kenley Jansen, Chris Martin, who had one of the best reliever seasons in recent memory. The interesting thing, though, obviously they're older guys, so we'll see if they're here by the end of this season or if things end up getting to a point midway through the year that they get traded. You at least have him at the beginning of the season as your back-end stalwarts. And then a lot of intriguing guys in the middle, Isaiah Campbell, a new guy that they just got, Justin Slayton. Who among this group stands out to you?
Well, I think you got to go back to your veterans, right? So if you're going to come out of the chute, and again, we go, how can this team contend? How can they be good? You've got to come out of the chute and start strong. And you have to have those guys, Kenley Jansen and Chris Martin, healthy. And they really just ramp things up the late stages of spring training. Kenley's getting up there. He said every part of his body ached. He hurts and things like that. That's a veteran close. Reminds me of Lee Smith going way back from years ago. You could walk into the Red Sox clubhouse and you'd smell what smelled like horse liniment from putting it on his elbow. But when the bell rang, he was able to pitch. So you hope that Jansen can be that kind of guy that he was last year. And you hope that Chris Martin, who was really probably one of the most underrated pitchers in all of baseball, can do what he does. Then you're good. If they go the route you're saying, then all bets are off, Joe, right? Then you're starting to find guys like Slayton and company, Weiser, all those guys that maybe could emerge as a back end or like a bullpen guy, because then you're just experimenting and you know where you're heading that way in the direction which is down when it comes to the standings. So I think they've got to get off to a good start, and then you hope somebody emerges out of those young guys that you mentioned and can come along and help big time in that bullpen.
Yeah, excited about Slayton and Campbell, two guys. Great strikeout stuff. Slayton himself, 86 batters he struck out between AA and AAA in the Rangers system, Rule 5 guy in 59 and 2/3 innings. But, of course, untested in the big leagues. Good to see Josh Winkowski back in the bullpen because we talked about that starting rotation. And he's a guy that it was a perfect fit in the bullpen last year.
Well, he's kind of like the guys that I love in that bullpen of Houck and, Whitlock. If we had the two starters at the top of the rotation, you can put those guys in because Winkowski's that type of guy. He can come in situations in the 6th inning and get you 2 innings and get you to where you need to be to Martin and Jansen. So those guys are critical. So somebody amongst that group that you mentioned with Slayton, can he step up and be that guy? He's young, so give him an opportunity, but you got to know how to pitch. It's the AL East, so there's going to be a lot of adjustments. The other thing that really concerns me about this entire staff is that you kind of wonder who's going to emerge as any left-handers in that bullpen, right? So there's not a lot to choose from, and they send out Brendan Berardino. He's been sent down, so. What's it? One lefty left.
Yeah, it's just Joely Rodriguez right now.
And Joely is, hit or miss. We don't know. He can be good. He feels good. He's excited about playing, but you got to rely on him as that one lefty. I'm a little concerned there too.
Yeah, great character guy. It's always fun watching him do interviews because he's always happy. But the return that you got from him last year, not like Brendan Bernardino, that was a surprise move. All right, last thing before I let you go here, Dan. Who's the guy in this team that intrigues you the most coming into the season?
Well, that's a good question. I would probably go with Bayo. Can he be that guy? Because if he can be that guy, then you're going into series with like, hey, there's a potential, ace here. Can he take that next step? Can he become that Pedro Martinez who's been mentoring him? And can he become that nasty guy? Can he go for the jugular? I think watching his story unfold all season long is going to be fun. I think it'll be cool. And then the other guy that you have to look at for me is Rafael. I like to look at the young guys. When he goes through that little swoon here, there's a possibility they might have to send him down, Joe. I mean, that's kind of how you look at it. But if he can kind of hang in there, adjust, do what they're trying to get him to do, you hope that he emerges as one of those young guys, one of those building blocks that this team desperately needs right now, as far as young guys are concerned. You?
Yeah, and Rafael is a guy that Alex Cora, you could tell from the get-go, was a player that he wanted to earn a job on that opening day roster with the Red Sox. And lo and behold, he makes his first ever opening day roster this year. He's going to be a ton of fun to watch. There might be times that you're shaking your head a little bit at the pitches that he goes after, because when you hear about him and his weaknesses, it's chase rate, right? It's the pitches that he swings at that he probably shouldn't be. But at the same time, an electrifying player that can do things on the field that some guys can't. So it should be a lot of fun to watch. But can't wait for it, Dan. Opening day tomorrow. You and I being such big baseball guys, it'll be a lot of fun. And we'll be bringing you these all season long. Hopefully the Red Sox can start us off with some wins on the West Coast. You might be asleep. You might try to stay awake for it. But the Red Sox on the road for 10 before they come back home for the opener on April 9th, a Tuesday. They're going to be honoring the 2004 Red Sox team.
Like to have baseball back. You have it in your pocket every single day from now through the World Series. Lots of coffee for Red Sox fans if you're planning to watch all of these games on the West Coast. But just try to enjoy the season as it starts. Hopefully they get off to a better start when they did this in 2019. It didn't go well when they were out on the West Coast to start the season. Hopefully things get rolling. They come home to Fenway and everything kind of falls into place. That's what you're hoping with the 2024 Red Sox.
And we'll see if Alex Cora can get his first opening day win as a Red Sox manager. Still 0 in that, as good as we know as he is at the job. All right, Dan, thanks for the time.
All right. Nice to talk to you, Joe.